Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be checking out the Marshall SV20H, also known as the Studio Plexi. To really understand what this amp is, we need to take a bit of a step back in time. So I'm sure Plexi is a term that almost all of you watching will be familiar with, and even if you aren't, it's definitely a sound you'll be familiar with. So what it means when someone says an amp has a Plexi-ish sound, what they mean is that it sounds a bit like a Marshall 1959 model. Now confusingly, this amp actually came out in the 60s. The reason it's called a Plexi is because some of these amps had a plexiglass panel behind the controls. Now even if you aren't familiar with this amp itself, you will no doubt be familiar with the sound, as it's been used by anyone and everyone, including people like Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, Angus Young from AC/DC, Slash, and Eddie Van Halen on early Van Halen stuff, and is still commonly used today by bands such as The Darkness and Biffy Clyro. So that's a little bit of a history lesson on the Plexi. Now those old amps from back in the 60s are either 50 or 100 watts, and they're really loud. Jump forward to a few years ago and Marshall released their Studio line of amps, which are iconic Marshall models such as the JCM, the Silver Jubilee and the Plexi, but in small 20 watt and switchable down to 5 watt heads and combos. The idea being that you can still get those great tones from the 50 and 100 watt amps, but because they're a lower wattage, you don't have to crank them up as loud, making them perfect for studio use. So this amp has two channels which aren't switchable. So you've got your normal and your high treble channel, and the way you switch between these is just by plugging in. Below these two inputs you've also got a lower level input if you want to get a lower gain tone or if you have something with particularly hot pickups. Controls wise, you've got your on-off switch and then your standby switch, which doubles as letting you switch between 20 watt and 5 watt mode, as I mentioned earlier. You've then got a presence control, bass, middle and treble, and then a control for the high treble channel and for the normal channel. So layout wise it's exactly the same as the old Plexis from the 60s. The back panel is where we find the changes from the 60s amps. So with it being designed for studio use, you now have a DI out and an effects loop, as well as a number of different outputs for different impedance speakers. So let's see how it sounds. Today I'm playing my 2024 Gibson SG Standard, and I'm running this straight into the front of the amp. I'm currently on the bridge pickup and I'm plugged into the normal channel with the normal volume around 2. Presence, treble, middle and bass are all at 12 o'clock, and that's how they'll stay for most of this video. So the normal channel at about 2 o'clock sounds like this. Now turning the normal volume up to about 5 or 12 o'clock. So at that point it starts to break up a little bit, and then if we push it up to about 3 o'clock, so it starts to break up quite a lot. But as you can hear, the normal channel is quite dark. So I'll now switch my cable over to input 1, which is the high treble channel. And with the volume on about 2 or at about 9 o'clock, it sounds like this. Turning that up to about 12 o'clock. And then cranking it all the way up to about 3 o'clock. So as you can hear, that channel is a lot brighter and starts to break up a lot sooner, but seems to lack a bit of low end. Now I'm sure if you're familiar at all with Plexis, you'll know about the channel jumping. For those of you that don't, when I say channel jumping, what I mean is taking just a standard patch cable like you'd have on your pedal board and putting that into the second high treble input and then running the other end of that into the normal channel input, the high input. Now what this does is this allows you to run both channels at the same time. Now when you are running each channel individually, the two channels will interact slightly when you change the volumes. However, when you do it like this, as you'd expect, because you're running both channels simultaneously, they really interact with one another. So we'll start off again with both controls at around 9 o'clock, and that sounds like this. So as you can hear already, it starts to break up a lot sooner and you're starting to get that really classic crunchy Marshall sound. Really as you'd expect. Now if I turn both volumes up to about 12 o'clock. So at this point we're really getting into that proper classic rock territory, and I'm sure it's a sound that you'll all be familiar with. Let's push it up to both controls up to about 3 o'clock. So obviously you can also have these controls at different points, and it's just a case really of blending the two together to taste. For me personally, I like to have the high treble about 12 o'clock and the normal channel on about 6, so just past 12 o'clock. And that sounds a bit like this. No, I think that sounds really great. And as you will have heard at the start, you can also push it with something like a tube screamer or whatever other overdrive you choose. I have also found that this amp does take pedals really, really well. At the same time as picking up this amp, I also picked up a Proco Rat, which there is a demo of coming soon, by the way. And I have found that these two together are a really great combo, so be sure to check out that video when that comes out. But there you go, so there's a brief rundown of the Marshall SV20H, or Studio Plexi. I feel like it doesn't need a whole lot of explanation, as it is a really, really classic sound and a really classic amp. And the only real difference here is that it's 20 watt instead of 50 or 100. The extra features on the back of the panel are really nice if you're into your recording and that sort of thing. But other than that, it's just classic Marshall through and through. Drop me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts on how it sounds. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.